Hey everybody, it's Chance. I was asked by a friend how I chop samples on the Volca sample, and I thought it would be a pretty good video idea, so I decided to make a quick video talking about how I prepare samples, how I chop them, how I arrange the chops. I also wanted to touch briefly on programming melodic lines from one-shots, so let's get into it. So the first thing to note about this is that the sample start point for the Volca sample 2 only goes up to 127 out of 128, which means roughly about 10% of the sample is still left once you get to the last point. So you can't really get all the way to the end. To combat this, you'll bring the sample into an audio editor. Today I'm using Reaper. You really just need some way to view it in samples. So, as you can see here, we have 576,000 samples. And what we want to do is multiply that by 0.1 so we can get the extra 10%. So 57,600, and then we add that number to the initial 576,000. 633,600. So now what we want to do is make our sample length this new value. So there you go. So what you would do now is render the audio of this sample out again with this much silence added to the end. And then you also want to make sure that you don't have a tail added to it that adds extra length. You want it to be precisely the edit points you have, because any more will throw off the calculation. Okay, so that's good. So now I have a drum loop in here for just another example. 288,000 samples. So 10% of that is 28,800. So we'll add that. 288,000 plus 28,800. So we need to make that our full sample length. And render this the same way. Okay, so I've brought back into the guitar loop. And another thing to keep in mind is this sample is pretty long. And a few samples like this would fill up the sample 2 pretty quickly. So to combat this, what you would do is speed it up by 1 or 2 octaves by changing the playback speed. So in this case, in Reaper, I can go to Properties. What you want to do is make sure you're not preserving the initial pitch when you're speeding it up. You want the pitch to get higher when it speeds up. That way, when you slow it back down, it goes back to the normal pitch. And I'm going to change this by 4 times the normal rate. And this will be, see it says here, 24 semitones, so it's up 2 octaves. But now when you slow this down by 2 octaves in the sample 2, it'll be at the initial pitch, and it gives it a little character. This is an old technique for sampling. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these over to the sample 2, get everything rendered, and show you how I chop them up on there. Okay, so now I've got the samples on here. Here's the drums. And the guitar sped up. And now if we take the guitar here and turn it down 2 octaves, and there you go. It's the original speed, and it fits perfectly for what we're trying to do. So the first thing you want to consider when you're chopping stuff like this is you want to take the amount of chops you want and divide that number by 128, which is the total start points in here. So if you want 16, that means you'll have increments of 8. In this case with the guitar, since it's a 4-bar loop, I'm only going to have 4 steps in each sequence. And this first sequence will start at, this first one will be 0, second one will be 8, and 16, and then 24. And now, and there's the first part of the loop. And the other thing you really want to do too is like, see if I stop it now, it'll just keep playing. For those whole 4 bars. So the next thing you want to do is do the same thing with the motion sequencing for the decay. I'm just putting random values in now, but you'll see it stops a little sooner. See, it fades out a little faster. You would fine tune that to be exactly how you want, but that's how you start. And if you wanted to mess around and flip it a little differently, you could use those increments of 8 to find other places in the sample. So in this case, we'll go all the way to 96 and see how that sounds. Okay. What about 112? There we go. You can even put one in the middle here and put that one at 96, or actually let's go 80. There we go. And in the case of the drums, we would do the same thing. This is a 2-bar loop, so those, if I still wanted it to be 16 steps, those 16 steps would be spread across 2 bars, meaning in step jump here, we would have a spot if we just wanted to play it outright with the chops every 2 steps. So I'm going to speed this process up, but anyways, you would go from 0 to 56. And 56, there we go. And same thing, you can move stuff around, same way. You would need to adjust the decay for these because it would keep playing out also. And also if you have any pops or clicks, you can do the same thing with the attack. Okay, so now let's program melodic or one-shots with this bass line as an example. How I like to treat these in the sample too is I like to tune the sample before I get it in here to the key of the song. And you'll see in a second why. So let me just program some steps real quick. So now you'll hear, which I need to definitely change the decay on this because it plays out pretty long. If you wanted to change the pitch of this by an incremental value related to a chromatic scale, you would hold the note down in step edit function and then speed to get the note value, as you can see here. So the reason I like to tune the sample to the pitch of the song is that way the increments it's going up and down is by that value, not by something not related to the scale of the song you're in. That way it's just a little bit easier. So if you wanted to go up a 5th here from the root, you would do note 7, which would be up 7 steps. And then if you wanted to go down to the 7th of the key, you would go in a minor scale note -2. There we go. So that's just kind of how I like to think about it. I find if I have it tuned to C, like you would typically find in a DAW or something, it gets very confusing because you're having to do the math to the root note and then to the note you're trying to go to. I just find that tuning it to the sample before I get it in here is just much easier to work with for me personally. Anyway, so that's pretty much how I do it. That's how I chop them. So for the guitar, I would spread that across the 4 bars, making variations as I go, and then, yeah. That's pretty much it. This was fun. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I hope it wasn't boring or annoying or anything like that. I enjoyed explaining how I think about working with this kind of stuff. If you have any questions, leave me a comment or whatever. If you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave it a like. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Until then, be good to each other.